Innovation is so important here in Massachusetts, and that's why we are the best place in the world for innovation. And today exemplifies why we will continue to be the best place in the world for innovation, because we're willing to bring all the key stakeholders together and have the important discussion. And not just talk about the problems, but work together so that we can come up with solutions to the problems.
I think most importantly, it's been identified that autism is being treated as a collection of symptoms, and that's the antithesis of the understanding that's needed in order to address it in most aggressive ways. Once a mechanism is identified, we can then measure it. If we can't measure it, we can't fix it. Once we measure it, then we can implement therapeutics that are developed to target those mechanisms and then substantially change how autism is treated and regarded.
This is the most exciting time we've ever had in the history of science with the Human Genome Project and everything that has emerged from that. But there are a lot of choke points between that science and the patient, and I think it's our job to remove those barriers.
We're going to start our discussion with talking about how do you accelerate innovation in general. And so I'd love Jenny Carey, who's the Associate Director of Federal Government Relations and Program, to give us a little summary of yesterday's discussion.
Sure, thank you so much. We had really the broad challenge of kind of talking about and exploring the choke points to innovation. There is a large gap in the number of clinicians that are innovating and bringing technologies to market. Clinicians often lack business acumen. It's a very different skill set than clinical or research work. Idea there for a solution is to consider offering business school curriculum or experiences to clinicians. The second piece is cultural stigma at some institutions with regard to partnerships between clinicians and industry and venture capitalists. The idea there is for academic medical centers to create better incentives for innovating through mentorship with those in their group that are successful clinical innovators, to promote successful partnerships with industry and VCs, and also kind of promote the role of an innovator as a key component of that clinician's duties.
Other comments on that of what it takes to get more people to go into innovative fields?
Attracting people into that space as innovators is very difficult because as you go through training, traditionally you finish your training and then you say, I'm going to be a gastroenterologist, and people have a concept of what that is, or I'm going to be a cardiologist, and people have a concept of what that is. But if you say, I'm going to be an innovator, people have no idea what that is, and I still face that today, because then you are in a lengthy discussion as to what disruptive thing you're going to introduce into a standard of care that's been accepted, and why what you're doing is superior to what exists. And that's a very difficult thing to explain, and it's an intimidating thing as a trainee to go into.
The second barrier we talked about was payment and reimbursement, that it's often a barrier to the commercialization and the payment physician adoption of new technologies and therapies. Solution there is actually pretty simple. We need to get more engaged with the payers early on in the process, contribute information about the data they want to see in terms of quality outcomes and cost effectiveness. And then the third, that there seems to be also in many cases an unclear understanding of the marketplace for specific products, a critical choke point where a great idea is just not properly marketed to the right demographic, or they don't quite understand who it is that's going to be making decisions about the adoption and purchase of their product.
We're going to move on now to our second breakout, which was on genomics, and Bob Coughlin, who's the president and CEO of Massachusetts Biotechnology Council.
When we really looked at the challenges, funding for both early stage research. If there isn't a model where there's going to be a profit at the end, why would anyone do the early stage investment? So funding in the area of genomics and diagnostics. And then on the other side, reimbursement. Government tends to reimburse for Medicare and Medicaid. The CBO will want to score something. You're going to score a test. Is it a $1,000 test? Is it a $1,500 test? Is it a $500 test? They don't take into consideration that there's long-term savings. Big data issues, privacy, fragmentation, there's different companies doing different things. How do we pull them together so that there's more consistency? Data-driven decision-making. How do we create tools and awareness about the best use of genomic data? Regulatory uncertainty. This is across the board. It's very difficult for people to make those high-risk investments when there's constantly regulatory uncertainty. Payer uncertainty. Same thing. And then standards. Who is going to establish the standards for data, the standards for accuracy, what's considered useful, and then keeping physicians and patients up to date and educating them for advancing genomic knowledge, as we learn more about what different variants actually mean. Patient and family support and empowerment. How do you engage the patients and the patient associations and families in understanding and advocating for genomic data in medicine?
Comments, questions from the audience?
There's a big gap between getting sequence information and being able to use it and use it effectively, and even more importantly, come up with treatments. So the reason now people will go and get cystic fibrosis testing is because there are some treatments. But until you had the treatments, you can't get action to happen. So it's the gap between, we have reams of genomic data these days, but we don't even know how to interpret it or use it effectively.
This industry is still in its infancy, so it's important that the group felt that we needed to launch a national public-private partnership centered on encouraging the adoption of clinical genomics in the context of pediatric medicine. And how do you do that? You pick a lead organization, and then you bring all the stakeholders together to develop that strategic plan. And the stakeholders that we identified for genomic medicine were the academics, medicine, payers, industry, commercial, advocates, disease foundations, professional organizations, and regulators. Form an advisory group where you take all the key stakeholders and make them part of the team that's going to develop the plan. And if you wait, as a group, we also decided that if we wait and let someone else come up with the plan, we're not going to like it.
Julia Finkel is the principal investigator at the Sheikh Zayed Institute of Pediatric Surgical Innovation, Children's National Medical Center, and she was the moderator at the Autism Breakout group yesterday.
The imperative first step in all of this was developing objective diagnostics, because the therapeutics then would follow, reimbursement would follow. A tremendous stumbling block that was identified over and over again is that both the diagnosis, the diagnosis is achieved, there are soft mechanisms. Objective measures that could either look at a genetic profile, a physiologic profile in the form of EEG or the like. These would be substantial objective measures that one could point to that then get compensated. Once a mechanism is identified, then therapeutics are devised to address those mechanisms. In terms of dissemination of care, only 20% of patients at risk are identified and treated early enough. That's a travesty. Lastly, funding, obviously, as in every case, would allow A, B, and C to occur in a much more formidable and faster manner.
What kind of system do you need to see to help things move fast, but also really improve health?
One of the things we thought that was the main impediment was our inability to define autism accurately and to really say who has autism and who doesn't have autism. And not only does that impede early screening, but it impedes knowing whether or not your treatment's working. You can't say who's got it, who doesn't have it, is it getting better or not getting better, then you're going to have an awful hard time with any kind of treatment, which then is going to make it difficult to get the treatment paid for because you're not having any real evidence that this treatment works and that treatment doesn't.